Hello, everyone, live from Switzerland. Yes, I'm far away from the normal studio, but a lot of news going on, and I wanted to be with you here today for it. It is good to see you all. I'm just noting that, we're going to start first with some of this ABC news that I want to get to, but then we got to talk about what's happening with this H-1B visa scenario. Libs really losing it over the threat of a possible Supreme Court justice. Imagine that, if that were to happen coming in. So that's another big deal we got to get to. A lot going on right now. Again, in this moment, as you join me live, and I'm just checking in with the team to make sure everybody back at home base is there and able to make sure that we are up with you on YouTube. I think so. Are you guys watching on YouTube? You can let me know in the chat. Let's see. Let me see if I can see these. Yes, I can do it. Imagine that. Amazing technology today. Amazing, amazing, amazing. And let's see. Here we go with the comments and reactions. I see you. Are you guys on YouTube? You are. Okay, fantastic. Making sure we are live on YouTube. Good. Okay. So, there's so much to discuss. And of course, Jimmy Carter passing away as well. So, as I said, so much to dig into. But I want to begin today first on the story that's coming to us from ABC News. So, I'm going to share with you a little secret. Men in television are so much worse than women ever could imagine being. I've always had this theory, women are actually pretty chill. It's the guys that you got to watch out for. And in this case, you got a couple of little guys over there at ABC that are apparently kind of duking it out because, well, they're jealous of each other. They're jealous. And now that Trump's in there, it's going to make it so much harder because there's only so much oxygen, there's only so much room, and there's only so much money. And you see Georgie boy, George Stephanopoulos, well, he lost 16 million of Disney's moolah to Donald Trump, both to the Trump library and, of course, to Trump's lawyers. And so he's not exactly high on the Disney list, right? If I'm Bob Iger right now, CEO of Disney, and I'm looking around at my most favorite nation, it's not going to be George Stephanopoulos. No. That's just not happening. David Muir, he's a little bit more under the radar, but you remember David Muir. He was the one who was very, very careful about making sure he corrected Donald Trump in that ABC News debate. Remember, it was David and his co-host that nobody had ever seen before named Lindsay, and they were both there ganging up alongside Kamala Harris against Trump. Well, apparently George is very jealous of David. Because like I said, there's nothing like men in television. Woo. Okay, here we go.
America great again. It's a very simple phrase. Make America great again. She's destroying this country. And if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from television.
But the people on television saying their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme.
He does a good job at seeming very, very official. Very, very, well, that is not what we've heard. That is not what the city manager is telling us. Anyway, that's the guy that George Stephanopoulos is reportedly so jealous of. That's the guy that allegedly, per this, Daily Mail report, along with some newsletter writer that actually has some decent sourcing when it comes to gossip, they're saying that apparently when the studio got redone and David got a bigger dressing room for Good Morning America or for World News Tonight, that George had to have a similar dressing room. I mean, it goes on and on. It's actually kind of funny. So here's the headline. 2 of ABC's top stars at war as historic tension is revealed. In other words, they've always hated each other. Or rather, George has always hated David. He's, for one thing, a lot taller and better looking. And, for whatever reason, was getting some of those plum jobs that Georgie wanted. And so he didn't like that David was getting all these big sort of political headlining jobs, for example, doing things like hosting the debate. So according to the article, it's been just all kinds of headaches for the network's bosses. Viewers may notice that for the last few years, Stephanopoulos, by the way, who's like a political animal, like, let's be very clear, he started his career as the flack for Clinton. He was like the KJP for the Clinton White House. And now somehow is pretending to masquerade as a journalist. Well, he's not even really masquerading that well, but he is pretending somehow badly that he is a journalist. And it cost him and his network $16 million. Anyway, they go on to say Stephanopoulos has been absent during politics-focused special coverage, such as election night, because those duties are now falling squarely to David Muir, the World News Tonight guy. The two news anchors, Daily Mail writes, have reportedly had a professional rivalry for years, which widened when Joe Biden's advisors chose Stephanopoulos to conduct the first ever interview with the president following his disastrous debate performance. Yeah, because David really wanted to do that one, right? The U.S. Sun reported in September that as the anchors moved into their new studio in New York City, Stephanopoulos wanted a dressing room as big as rival David Muir's space. How did I start this whole thing? There's nothing like men in television. Oh my gosh. I've always wondered why that is. Like, what is, how is it? I guess you've got these big egos and these little people. Well, earlier this year, Daily Mail reported on a Radar Online story. Actually, we reported on that too, as well as these other publications, about this alleged feud that was going on because there's this behind the scenes tension. And now it's like bubbling up and up and up. So Georgie had his contract coming up around 2021, and he wasn't going to renew because he felt like David was getting too much. And so Bob Iger had to fly out and like do the whole deal himself. He took it all on. And now I just wonder if he's really thinking that was all worth it. Because this was the guy who was going on and on about how you had to remember just exactly like everybody else, right? Whoopi Goldberg, oh, you're going to vote for Hitler if you vote for Trump. He was saying, oh, the stakes are so damn high 2 days before the election. No, the stakes weren't that high well, they were high for America in terms of inflation being put to bed, in terms of the border finally getting addressed, etc. But really, remember, they were high for George because George was getting sued. And ABC News and Disney were getting sued by Trump. So here he was saying this.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. It is almost over. What comes next is anyone's guess. What we do know is this. No election since the Civil War has posed such a test of our constitutional system. Whether to accept election results and the peaceful transfer of power has never been on the ballot like this. The stakes in this election are as high as it gets. The differences between the candidates are as stark as it gets. And as we emerge from the final weekend, the polls suggest that this election is as close as it gets.
Our thanks to our friends over at Newsbusters for giving us that one. So the stakes were really, really high, but they were mainly really high, not just for America and everyday Americans, but also for George in a very personal way, because, it looked like he or his network was going to have to settle. He was really, really angry when they settled, but so be it. So there's all this tension, right, that's going on. In the meantime, over on that morning show that we all love to hate, The View, Whoopi Goldberg, who constantly, every time she said Donald Trump's name, would then spit on the floor. You remember,
Listen,
right?
Take him seriously and take him literally.
Mm-hmm. I don't think that we have to. I think it would be remiss of us to not say Joe Biden knows how to do this. Yes, he knows how to do this. He's quite good at this. And you can't refute anything with him because he just, when I say him, I mean
he rambles.
Trump.
Yeah.
He tends to just.
But can I mention one thing? Because Trump is out there.
Okay. So that's like her signature move, all right? She just has to spit every time she says his name, when she says his name, because often she just actually refers to him as you know who. So ABCUC has a problem. ABC is broadcast over publicly owned airwaves, which is why the new head of the FCC, Brendan Carr, just the other day sent a nice, nasty little letter to one Bob Iger, reminding him of the lack of trust that people have in news networks nowadays. And in that letter, he was sort of softly, gently reminding him that, you know what, I can pull the plug on you pretty darn easily, because guess what? You're all over these airways. And in order for all of these little local affiliates around the country to have their licenses, their ABC licenses, they got to get it from me. And yeah, I know historically the FCC hasn't been that out in front of this stuff, but guess what? There's a new sheriff in town by way of Donald Trump, and there's a new head of the FCC by way of me, Brendan Carter. He was effectively saying, I'm paraphrasing for fun, but you get the idea here. So ABC is in a bad spot, and there's lots of talk of layoffs. There's lots of talk of headcount reduction. I mean, layoffs, whatever you want to call it. And there's talk that anchors are going to have to take smaller salaries. Now, it also has been reported that George just renewed, but I would be cautious on that renewal. We don't know all the details. We don't know as he's locked in, and you don't know how much that was of Disney just trying to say, okay, well, we'll lock him up for the next 3 years, maybe in a pay-to-play type scenario. So they have all the authority. They can get rid of him if they want and say, see ya. Anyway, it's sort of amazing to watch, because this media for sure was, I think, the most biased I've ever seen. I mean, hopefully it scales back from that, but I think it's going to be hard. I think that there's a ton of bias out there in the media, and we saw it over and over and over again. I mean, the best example, certainly this year, is what we saw with Joe Biden. Well, I mean, going back over 3 years, but there's a lot of good. I mean, there's the laptop, there's the Russia stuff, the things that were like figments of their imagination that they tried to tar and feather Trump with. And then you had, well, the Wuhan virus, the coronavirus that came from Wuhan, but nobody was allowed to actually say it came from Wuhan. And they flipped out when Donald Trump suggested that there was intelligence suggesting, yes, it may have come from Wuhan. They never even showed Biden this stuff, but heck, they didn't even show Biden his poll numbers, right? Biden didn't even get to see where he was polling. Thank you very much. So he was really in the dark. I mean, it was like some dictatorship, some deep state dictatorship going on, because for the last 4 years, I mean, not only did we not, the public, I mean, get information, they didn't allow reporters to report it. And then on top of it all, they didn't even give it to the president of the United States. So think of how messed up that is. And we knew how bad he was. Think about it. I showed you over and over and over again right here on this show, all the tape. I'd show the whole length of the tape so you could see it. And you could see him in all his glory. And as much as we saw that, and as much as he seemed out of it, guess what? They wanted you to believe differently. And they went on to mainstream media and they promoted a narrative that was completely bogus, and they did it with a straight face, and nobody called them out on it. Here we go.
Does the president have the stamina, physically and mentally, do you think, to continue on even after 2024?
Don, you're asking me this question. Oh my gosh, he's the president of the United States. I can't even keep up with him.
The most difficult part about a meeting with President Biden is preparing for it, because he is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
I can testify because I've been working very closely with this president for the past 2 years. I've been knowing him for 30 years. And I'm telling you, this guy's tough. He's smart. He's on his game.
Joe Biden has vision. He has knowledge. He has a strategic thinker.
The president is focused. He's detail-oriented. He's always thinking about the big picture.
He is engaging. He is capable. He has an incredible record as president.
And I'm often with him on foreign trips. He's at the top of his game.
So he has a vision. He has knowledge. He has judgment. He has a strategic thinking.
I met with the president, 5 or 6 weeks ago, and he seemed fine to me.
I have complete confidence in the president. I have watched him expertly guide meetings of staff and cabinet members. I could not have more confidence in the president.
I would just tell you that I meet frequently with the president, and every single time I meet with him, he is just fine.
But he is, again, knowledgeable, wise.
Incredibly sharp, incredibly probing, incredible command of the details.
He is sharp. He is on top of things.
There is nothing to these challenges, these suggestions that somehow he's not sharp and he's not capable.
We see Joe Biden up close. We know how attuned he is to the issue.
And you're going to see how smart he is and the experience he has.
I say his age is an asset.
Aha!
He's wise.
Yes, he's wise. He has wisdom. He has experience.
And his experience, because of his age and his wisdom, has been invaluable to this country.
A lot of countries,
okay, I can't take it anymore, but like it goes on and on and on. You get the picture. We had to listen to that. They said that with a straight face to us for years. They had every opportunity to primer him, and they didn't. Why didn't they? Because they wanted to stay in control? By they, I mean, who's they? I mean, who is they? Because they were not allowing him to even see his poll numbers. So he had no idea how badly he was doing. For all we know, they weren't even telling him what real wages were, adjusted for inflation. They were just telling him wages are going up. Yeah. But adjusted for inflation, what are the inflation numbers? It's really remarkable. But it's such a fascinating insight into what can be, what can happen, and how dangerous this can get, frankly, right? I mean, how quickly this can just go totally off the rails. I mean, I love it. There's this reporter over at CBS who looks at her colleagues with a totally straight face. And when they ask her, what was the most underreported story of the year? I mean, she doesn't have a choice now. You got to call it like you see it at this point if you want to seem like you got any credibility. And here she is, Jan Crawford, saying, yeah, I'd have to say that the Biden cover-up was probably the biggest deal.
One of the things we also do in the year-end correspondence roundtable is dig into what was undercovered or underreported. Jan?
Undercovered, underreported. That would be, to me, Joe Biden's obvious cognitive decline that became undeniable in the televised debate.
At the presidential debate with Donald Trump.
Unquestioned. And, it's starting to emerge now that his advisors kind of managed his limitations. It's been reported in the Wall Street Journal for 4 years. And yet he insisted that he could still run for president. We should have much more forcefully questioned whether he was fit for office for another 4 years, which could have led to a primary. For the Democrats. It could have changed the scope of the entire election. Yet, still, incredibly, we read in the Washington Post that his advisors are saying that he regrets that he dropped out of the race. That he thinks he could have beaten Trump. And I think that is either delusional or they're gaslighting.
President Biden has said repeatedly he was sick during the debate June 27th in Atlanta, and he's always been fine, and he leaves fine. That is his position, the position of many of his top aides as well, even though there is that reporting.
Robert Costa.
Like, they don't want to admit it. They still don't want to admit it. That one guy who's like, well, this is their reporting, this is their reporting. Well, shame on them. Those people that are around him are not doing him any favors at all. Nor the country any favors. I mean, if you actually wanted to do the right thing for the country, what would you have done? You would have allowed him to be primaried. You would have gotten somebody else in. Instead, you got a Jimmy Carter 2.0 situation all over again. I told you it would happen. God bless his soul, right? Jimmy Carter dead at 100 years old. We're going to talk about that later. But when you think of the manipulation of the media over the last 4+ years, because it started back in 2016, I'd argue, actually, given that I've been around it since the year 2000, it started a long time ago. There is only one sort of route that you're supposed to take, and that's to the left. And that's what's really scary. It just reached a crescendo. That's the word I was looking for earlier. It reached a crescendo, and that's what's terrifying. And in more ways than one, it wasn't just Biden's health. It was also things like, pretty important, the origin of the coronavirus. I remember a time when I actually, you couldn't even say the word coronavirus. I came up with a euphemism for it. I used to say March 2020. It's so ingrained in me that I still sometimes say March 2020 instead of saying COVID or coronavirus or Wuhan, China. Because, that was no-go territory. And think of that. How crazy is that you couldn't thank goodness Elon Musk came along and bought Twitter. and renamed it X and allowed the free flow of information. Because when the intelligence apparatus of the deep state is trying to somehow suppress something, and they're doing so with the blessing Anthony Fauci and company, and we don't get the real information, that's pretty alarming. So there's still this debate, right? I think the CIA they still have not fully come out and said, yeah, it is actually a virus that was created in a lab in Wuhan, China. It wasn't this, animal spread that they were trying to make everybody go with. And I'm not really sure why that was, unless what Robert Redfield, the former director of the CDC, is now saying, if there's some truth to that, maybe they just didn't want to look as though they were implicating themselves. Because according to Redfield, and I'm going to play you this soundbite, he believes there's quite a possibility that we had intelligence operations there in that Wuhan lab that were working on this gain-of-function research alongside these Chinese scientists. And if that's the case, then boy, that would not be a good look, right? For our deep state, that would not have been a good look. So that may have been in part what was motivating the cover-up. We don't really know, but there's a new Wall Street Journal report that came out this week showing that they didn't even give Biden the information that they needed to on COVID. And that, again, I find pretty darn frightening, because I'm left saying, who is in charge? Let's listen to this. This is an excerpt from something that was on Fox over the weekend. He's saying that, there's a lot of reasons this happened the way it did.
The Wall Street Journal reporting that spy chiefs silenced researchers who discovered evidence that COVID-19 most likely leaked from a Chinese lab. The report revealing, quote, 3 scientists at the National Center for Medical Intelligence, part of the Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency, conducted a scientific study that concluded that COVID-19 was manipulated in a laboratory in a risky research effort. But that analysis was at odds with the assessment of their parent agency, the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and it wasn't brought into and incorporated into the report then presented to Biden. Dr. Robert Redfield is the former CDC director, and he joins us now. Dr. Redfield, great to see you this morning. Here's the new bombshell part we have to highlight once again. They knew. Intelligence knew this was most likely created in a lab, but they stopped that intelligence from flowing all the way up to the president. Why?
It's a very important question, Will, but I can tell you that there clearly was a proactive decision by individuals to really only present one scenario for the origin of COVID, which is the natural spillover, which is the scenario that NIH was supporting. When I will say there really is no evidence for spillover whatsoever, just a lot of opinion. And all of the evidence, as we saw both with the FBI and the energy analysis when they came forward, really does point that this was a laboratory leak. This was a consequence of scientific experiments that unfortunately leaked out of the laboratory, which caused a global pandemic, and it cost over 20 million people their lives. So I don't know the political reason why people aren't honest, but clearly the intelligence agency has been duplicitous in this cover-up of the true origins of COVID.
Yeah. Duplicitous at best. And he goes on to say why that might have been. And he specifically references EcoHealth and an EcoHealth Alliance operation that may have been there in Wuhan, China. So this is really, really interesting, you guys, in light of everything that we have been through. You think about this. This was nearly 4 years ago. I mean, more than 4 years ago now. It's just unbelievable.
I think it's very, very possible that Peter Daszak and the EcoHealth Alliance was part of that. I think even as you pointed out, it's most likely that our intelligence agency had assets that were deployed inside that laboratory. And in fact, as a consequence, didn't want too much scrutiny into the laboratory. The scientific community didn't want the scrutiny into gain-of-function research in the laboratory because they didn't want the government to come in and regulate scientific research. The intelligence community, I think, really blocked any scrutiny because they didn't want scrutiny into potentially uncovering their assets that they had already deployed.
Okay, so then the idea would be that just so that I understand completely, I want to hammer it. I do want to hammer it a little bit because I want to understand. What would the intel agencies using EcoHealth Alliance be spying on China for? To avert exactly what ended up happening, or a bioweapon being developed? Like, what were they monitoring? And then as a consequence, had to cover up their presence and what happened in that lab?
Yeah, probably monitoring the Chinese dual-use laboratories. As you know, the Wuhan laboratory was a dual-use military civilian laboratory, and monitoring to see what type of biomedical research they were doing, particularly worrying about weapons of mass destruction and whether they were getting into research that was outside the grounds of what they should do by treaty. But sometimes I think intelligence communities just get, satisfied just to have the intelligence. I mean, clearly this was an intelligence failure. Right. The COVID pandemic. The pandemic started in August, September of 2019, and we're not really assimilating it in our intelligence until the end of the year. This was a major intelligence failure. And the only thing I can say, and I don't have any privileged knowledge of the internal workings of the CIA, the only thing I can say is that they were trying to protect their assets. They had a huge purging of their assets about a decade earlier in China. And I think they just were protecting their assets at the expense of just not telling the truth. I think the truth will come out. I'm very excited about John Radcliffe being the new CIA director. I think John will get all of these agencies back in the room and to look at the data. I think it was very disappointing, unfortunately, but predictable, that they didn't have the FBI at the briefing for the president. The FBI, which was the one agency that concluded with their scientists that this was most likely from the laboratory, and they weren't in the briefing. I just think that
they weren't there in the briefing with President Biden because they were trying to hide everything from President Biden, from his poll numbers to the gain of function research. And they sat there and they told him something else entirely. And that's what I think is most disturbing for every American, right? We can't have presidents that can be so manipulated by their handlers, right? I mean, that's the advantage, I think, that we have with Donald Trump, because he's fully in control, likes to micromanage. And given that we had somebody who wasn't doing any management at all, it's kind of good to have that. It's really good to have that. I'll tell you, libs are losing it over this one. What do you think about the idea that Donald Trump is going to get a fourth Supreme Court justice, maybe even this year? I mean, I think he's going to get 4, 5, and possibly 6. No wonder the left wants to stack the court the way they talk about it. This is happening, guys. I mean, he's going back in, and the timing is going to work out. And you got people like Sotomayor that probably should have retired, that didn't, that may have to. She'll be coming up. I want to show you an excerpt from the CBS show over the weekend, where you have one reporter who covers the Supreme Court, and she covers it well. She's covered the Supreme Court for many, many years, and she's predicting that it's actually Alito that's going to go first. I'm not so sure. But yeah, he's going to get a 4th Supreme Court justice and a 5th. And maybe even more. Watch.
I'll go back to the court. I think that Donald Trump will probably get his 4th nomination to the Supreme Court either this year or maybe next year.
Because someone retires.
Justice Sam Alito.
Justice Sam Alito.
He was nominated, took the bench in 2006 after nearly 2 decades on the court.
So again, we'll see. Sam Alito could be the first, certainly. But it might also be Sotomayor. Just saying. I mean, she's had some health problems, and I realize they try and downplay that, and she tries to downplay that, and nobody actually wants to give up those seats, but it could happen. It could happen. And so Donald Trump will have had such an imprint on the country. This is just, wow, right? And you got the news today. You saw the news with the federal court there in New York upholding the fine of, what was it, $5 million for the Jean Carroll stuff against him, and said that's obviously a legal setback for him. But when it's all said and done, he's winning the war. He may be losing the game, right, with that just one little thing and the Jean Carroll thing, but he's winning the war, frankly, for the country. And that's what I think we have to look forward to. So long as the left doesn't try and, split us up first. You know what? I'm supposed to do a commercial in this show. You see what happens? I come over here to Switzerland and I completely forget about all the things I'm supposed to do. One of them is to give a shout out for my friends over at Legacy. Forgive me. Let's see. We can get this up here. You know what? We're just going to skip it. We're going to do it a little bit later in the show. How's that? Because I do actually want to get to the H-1B visa standoff thing. This is when I say, they have to be cautious about, Republicans need to be cautious about not being divided, because this is a divide and conquer thing that they just love to do. And I think we're somewhat vulnerable to it. We won't be, because I think we see through it all. But nonetheless, this is what they're trying. And it gets back to the H-1B visa thing. And it all sort of erupted over the last couple of days because somehow Vivek started tweeting about this, and then Elon was tweeting about it, and the next thing you know, the media is jumping on it, and they're like, oh, because they love it, because they see this opportunity to drive a wedge right down the middle of MAGA, because you have people that are big Trump supporters that feel very strongly that we should not be having foreign workers come here and possibly make less money and do jobs that Americans can do. And then you have a contingency of people, and I would actually argue the president is with them on this. And this is an Elon thing, but I've known Trump a long time, and he's always been very pro H-1B visa, or at least visas for really, really super talented people that can only do one thing that you can only get in one place. And his fury has been that the system has been abused and we can't allow for that, but that you do need to be recruiting people that can help the nation, right? So this is what's at odds. You've got some people that say, no, we don't want anybody coming in no matter what, because those jobs could go to Americans and they're going to undercut the pay. And then you have some saying, well, no, there's the 0.001% of engineers in the world that maybe are only going to come out of these specific countries, and we ought to be able to recruit them. We ought to be able to bring them in. And so this is why this is now suddenly an issue. Vivek writing over the weekend, the reason top tech companies often hire foreign-born and first-generation engineers over Native Americans isn't because of an innate American IQ deficit, a lazy and wrong explanation. He said a key part of it comes down to the C-word culture. Tough questions demand tough answers, and if we're really serious about fixing the problem, we have to confront the truth. Our American culture has venerated mediocrity over excellence for way too long, at least since the 90s, likely longer. That doesn't start in college, it starts young. Now, he's not wrong on that, right? If you're going to actually prioritize math and science, you got to prioritize math and science. If you want to have the best engineers in the world, you've got to make it really, really important in the curriculum. And let's face it, they don't make that so important in curriculum. No. You know what's way more important than math and science nowadays? Making sure you know your pronouns. And you understand that there's no such thing as gender. That's what they're feeding you in school today. No math and science. They're not creating engineers. They're creating a bunch of wusses. And that's a problem. So now Vivek sent that out. People started, flipping out, and you have the left trying to drive a wedge. And then you have Donna Brazil. Remember her? She's over on ABC News. Funny, it all comes back to ABC and Disney, doesn't it? ABC News over the weekend, she tries to say that Elon is out there trying to run the show, trying to control Trump, and this H-1B visa thing is a great example of it. Watch.
Yeah, we don't know. In fact, Don, what I've told, and we'll see how this plays out, I'm told that Elon Musk is not going to have a pass.
He's not going to have
a pass with a White House pass. He'll be able to go when he has an appointment, but it's not like Mar-a-Lago where he can hang out 24/7 and sleep there.
Yeah, but he's going to control the conversation. He's going to control the vibe. Not only on his X platform, but we saw this week and the previous week that he is dipping his finger into a lot of so-called soup. And it's not just immigration, but look what just happened with the House. With the House vote on the government shutdown. He was like, shut it down. So Elon Musk is going to have a lot of influence in this administration. This is Donald Trump, who back in 2016, after he won, he wanted to look at the H-1B program. He wanted to reform it. He wanted to see if it impacted American workers and American jobs. And all of a sudden, he's now embracing it. I think because Elon Musk is putting a lot of pressure.
Okay, so Rachel, what's going to happen with the speaker's race? Because
you know what? that's actually not totally right. And again, I'm just going to go back to, I've known him a long time, and I remember what he was saying in 2016, and he's actually been very, very for H-1B visas. He's tweaked it a little bit in that he doesn't want H-1B visas so that somebody can go hire an accountant or anything else that you could really get here. But in terms of top tier engineering talent, he's not against that. Here's Elon Musk basically laying it all out there. Elon's like, I'm not backing down. I'm not backing down from this. I feel passionately. Here he is, quote on X, saying, the reason I'm in America, along with so many critical people who built SpaceX, Tesla, and hundreds of other companies that made America strong, is because of H-1B. Take a big step back and F yourself in the face. Woo, okay. I will go to war on this issue, the likes of which you cannot possibly comprehend. So I think that was meant to sort of calm down some of the more rabid people in the base that feel very strongly that we shouldn't have any H-1B visas. You know, here's a thought. Like, why not say, okay, you're going to come here. We think you're the best engineering talent they have in India or in Timbuktu. But here's the deal. You know, maybe there is actually a path to citizenship for those folks because you actually do want to keep them here. What I don't like is the idea that you have foreigners coming here, working for American companies, and then going home and taking all of that knowledge. Many of them are educated here. They're educated here, then they work for American companies, and they take that power and know-how, and they take it back to China, or they take it back to India. I want it to stay here. Thank you very much. So that's a nuance that perhaps they could be looking at too. But what I don't want is to see the Republican Party start to get splintered over this, because I'm telling you guys, we got everything going for us right now, everything in the world going for us. And we're going to see a tremendous 2025, and we don't need to be derailed by the likes of Donna Brazil and others in the media, the mainstream media, that are desperate. You just watch. Like, this is going to be the MO for The View next week or whenever they come back on TV. I think they're off. I'm not off. I'm here. I'm here no matter what. Come rain, come shine with you guys. But I think a lot of shows are off. That's why you're seeing a lot of talent on television that you've never seen before. I'm like, oh, that person's new. But a lot of people are off right now. When The View comes back, one of the messages that you're going to hear over and over again is the H-1B visa thing, Elon, and how Elon's calling all the shots. I happen to know that Elon's not calling all the shots. And I can tell you that because Scott Bessent would not be Treasury Secretary right now if Elon were calling all the shots. Elon actually wanted Howard Lutnick from Cantor Fitzgerald, you know, the really, really established bank. Obviously, Howard's great, but he didn't get it. He did not get the gig because Donald Trump wanted Scott. That was not an Elon pick. Elon was even tweeting, don't forget, for Howard, and it didn't happen. So, important stuff to consider. Jimmy Carter, dead at the age of 100. Jimmy Carter goes down in history for perhaps the worst presidency before Biden came along. And I always said Biden was going to be Jimmy Carter 2.0, meaning Jimmy, but worse, when it came to things like inflation, because he just had all the wrong policies, much like, unfortunately, one Jimmy Carter did. And Jimmy Carter, actually, they did primary him, if you think about it. That was Ted Kennedy. And Jimmy made it out of that one, but never made it beyond Reagan, right? Because Reagan was a force, a political force that could not be beaten. And thank goodness Reagan came in. Anyway, Jimmy presided over a really, really difficult time for the economy. I will say this, Donald Trump had some very magnanimous things to say about him here on Truth Social. He wrote, as the news came out, I just heard the news about the passing of President Jimmy Carter. Those of us who have been fortunate to have served as president understand this is a very exclusive club, and we can only relate to the enormous responsibility of leading the greatest nation in history. The challenges Jimmy faced as president came at a pivotal time for our country, and he did everything in his power to improve the lives of all Americans. For that, we owe him a lot, a debt of gratitude. Melania and I are thinking warmly of the Carter family and their loved ones during this difficult time. We urge everyone to keep them in their hearts and prayers. Okay, so he's saying he did everything he could. Oh, Well, I mean, I guess the problem is maybe he did everything in his power at the time because he had limited knowledge. And that's the challenge of having somebody in office with such limited knowledge, especially on economic issues. So he put out a second posting, and I thought that was interesting. This is the second one he put on Truth Social that was similar, but he did point out there how he disagreed with him philosophically and politically. He said, while I strongly disagree with him politically and philosophically, I also realized that he truly loved and respected our country and all it stands for. He worked hard to make America a better place, and for that I give him my highest respect. He was a truly good man, and of course he will be greatly missed. He was also very consequential, far more than most presidents, after he left the Oval Office. Warmest condolences from Melania and I to his wonderful family. So that at least was sort of able for Trump to get a little bit of how he felt about his policy. He didn't agree with Jimmy Carter's policies. I think in retrospect, no one really agreed with Jimmy Carter's policies, but he was seen as somebody who had some leadership later in life after leaving office, and Trump wants to credit him for that. Biden, meanwhile, was asked by a reporter, because you know where the reporters are going with this. In fact, I saw a headline in the Daily Mail already that liberals are saying, hey, this is how we can get Trump. This is how we can overshadow the inauguration. We can counter it with the funeral of Jimmy Carter. I mean, talking about morbid, but they are pretty morbid. Here's Joe Biden saying what he thinks Donald Trump can learn from Carter. And it's like the light bulbs just went off in all these liberals' heads when they heard this.
Contact his chip.
Is there anything that President Trump to take from President Carter?
Decency. 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 Everybody deserves a shot. Everybody. Can you imagine Jimmy Carter walking by someone and he needs something and just keep walking? Can you imagine Jimmy Carter referring to someone by the way they look or the way they talk? I can't. I think the end of the deal here is that one of the reasons why we're looked to by the rest of the world, for the bulk of our nationhood, we've laid out what our values are. We've said what we believe. It's not just in the Declaration we hold these truths to be self-evident, but there's a feeling. The rest of the world looks to us. And he was worth looking to. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, so you can anticipate that there will be a lot more sort of, well, Jimmy was great, and Jimmy's dead, and Trump's coming into office. They're gonna play that. I can see it screen by screen, right? The half the screen is Jimmy, half the screen is Trump. This is what the media will want to do. But look, I don't know a ton about Jimmy Carter other than what the numbers show. And that was a pretty miserable time for this nation's economy. And everything that he could have done and should have done to combat it, he didn't. And so ultimately, the blame does lie with the CEO, the boss, the president. And he got blamed for it. And America voted him out and voted Reagan in, and we ushered in a tremendous era of prosperity. And I have a feeling history is repeating itself in a new kind of way all over again here. And that's what's great. So, by the way, if you're interested in investing in this era of prosperity, and you should be, make sure you go check out 76 Research. It's my financial research company, 76research.com. Go over there. You can sign up for code word for just $1 a month with code word dollar, DOLLAR. Go to 76research.com and check that out, because there's a lot of great, wonderful, rich material for you, including some model portfolios. So if you want actual names 10 to 15 names in each one of those portfolios. You could sign up for one of the portfolios. But 76research.com, we have the 76 report. It's our newsletter that we put out, and really there's just a wealth of information there for you. It's $1 a month, code word dollar. After the first 2 months, it goes to $9.95. You can cancel anytime. So you don't even need to be out $1. If you don't like it, don't worry. No harm, no foul. Anyway, I just think that there is good stuff ahead. I'm excited about 2025. I'm excited to ring in the new year with you guys. And thank you for your patience today. I'm hearing from some of you that the audio is a little sketchy. We'll see if we can fix that. I am on a laptop, believe it or not, a laptop computer, so we don't have the same setup as normal here in Switzerland right now. But yeah, we're growing and growing. Christopher, I'm looking at your note there, 506,000 subs here. Isn't that amazing? We got to 500 there on Christmas Day. That was a heck of a Christmas present. Thank you so much for everything you guys do. And I love having you here. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done that. Make sure you subscribe, share, like, comment. Let me know, what did you think of Jimmy Carter? I mean, I just look at those numbers, and I remember as a little kid, those gas lines. None of it was good, right? Now, oh, thank you guys. Oh, love her. I love Mississippi. Great to see you in Mississippi. And thanks to all of you. I will be back here with you again tomorrow. It's like evening my time. Dawn, I'm probably on your time schedule now because you're over in Europe. But anyway, thank you so much. I'll see you again tomorrow. We have more to discuss.